Hello, my name is Richard Lancaster and I'm a volunteer with the environmental organisation Greenpeace, and the topic of today's talk is climate change or the climate emergency. Now, as these pictures show, climate change, which is sometimes called global heating or the greenhouse effect, is caused by our burning of fossil fuels, that's coal, oil and gas. Now, the pictures show the sorts of places where we burn these fossil fuels: power stations, from the emissions from cars and other vehicles, from aeroplanes and so on. And these all add CO2 to the atmosphere. Now, it hasn't always been like this. Up until about 1760, Britain was a very, very different place from modern Britain. It was a very agricultural type of society, and these two pictures show a typical agricultural scene. And where there was any sort of industry, it was what we call cottage industry. So it was individual workers or just a few workers working either at home or in very small cooperatives. And here's a picture, the second picture shows somebody with a spinning wheel at home making clothes. But come 1760, this was the start of what's called the Industrial Revolution. And at that stage, things started to happen very, very quickly. Factories went up, and these two pictures show typical insides of factories. Lots and lots of machines, and often people, including children, working on the machines. And these machines were things which were making cloth and spinning and weaving, and there were lots of clever inventions that allowed, first of all, water and then steam power to be used to power looms and printing presses and hammers and all sorts of other equipment. It started off with the powering of machinery in factories, but very soon we had locomotives. These photographs show Stephenson's rocket, which was one of the first successful steam locomotives. And then later we saw the development of motor cars, and later again aeroplanes. And all of these relied on the burning of fossil fuels, so that's coal, oil and gas. And as this picture shows, many of the factories and the vehicles that were using oil or gas were pumping out large amounts of pollutants. And this picture shows some factory chimneys, and you can see the thick black coal smoke that's pouring out. Now, although people were aware of the coal smoke and the fact that that got in your eyes and it made things dirty, what they weren't aware of was at the same time they were adding something called CO2, a gas called CO2, into the atmosphere. And one of the reasons why they weren't aware of it is that CO2 modules are so small. A CO2 molecule is about 1/1000th the size of a human hair, so incredibly difficult to detect. But nevertheless, we were adding CO2, and as this graph shows, much of the CO2 has been added since the Industrial Revolution. So you can see back in the 1760s, almost no CO2 in the atmosphere. And then as we've gone through until modern day, you can see a massive increase. And the different colours on the graph shows the different contributions of coal, oil and gas, and then a small amount from some other things. But coal in grey, oil in blue and the gas in the sort of the orangey colour. And it shows the massive increase in CO2 that's going into the atmosphere. Okay, so CO2 is going into the atmosphere. Why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because CO2 getting into the atmosphere traps the sun's heat, and it causes the planet to heat up. And as these two diagrams show, normally we get the heat from the sun, and then a certain amount is radiated back off the Earth's surface and escapes into the atmosphere. But as more and more CO2 is accumulated in the atmosphere, it reflects extra heat back. So not as much heat from the sun is being reflected and then escaping off into space. It's getting reflected back onto the Earth again. And this is what we call climate change, or the greenhouse effect, or global warming. And we can see the effects of global warming in various things, but a good way of seeing it is by looking at the effect on glaciers. And these two photographs here show the same skyline, the same coastline, and one of the photographs was taken in 1915, and you can see a huge glacier. The white is the glacier, the ice of the glacier. And then another photograph taken just over 100 years later in 2018, and you can see that the glacier has all but disappeared. And the effects of climate change are not just that things warm up, but we get other effects. So for instance, as these two photographs show, some places will become too dry, we'll start getting droughts. But other places will become too wet and we'll get floods. And we can also see that many animals will be affected. And these two photographs show two of the effects. One of them, the bleaching of coral reefs. So the photo at the top left shows what a coral should look like, and the photograph at the top right shows a bleached coral. And the photograph at the bottom shows two polar bears on an ice floe. And once the ice melts, it's very, very difficult for the polar bears to hunt for their food. They live off seals and they can't really hunt for their food once the ice melts. And what's happening is that the ice is melting sooner in the spring and it's coming later, it's freezing later in the winter. And so what this means is that the CO2 in the atmosphere causing the climate change means that we will have more things like floods, storms, forest fires and droughts. And we call these extreme weather events. What we've got now is a short film which will just show how some of these effects are being caused by climate change and global warming. So that shows some of the effects, and Greenpeace, as these photographs show, have been campaigning around the world to try and highlight the dangers of climate change. So what are the solutions? Well, first of all, we need to stop burning fossil fuels, coal, oil and gas, and we need to move to what we call renewable or sustainable energy. And sustainable energy sources are things like these shown in this photograph: wind, wave and solar. And it may be that some of you have got solar panels on your houses already, and you will have seen wind turbines as you travel around the country. And there are other things which can also generate energy from unusual places. Ground heat exchange is a way, it's a sort of a reverse refrigerator, and it generates heat from the ground. And also tidal flow is like a wind turbine, but sort of upside down under the sea, so it catches the tidal flows. And also hydroelectric schemes, which capture the flow of rivers and turn that into electric power through turbines. We also need to move away from burning fossil fuels in our vehicles, so we need more electric vehicles. And we also need to stop using vehicles for short journeys. Where possible, we need to get more people cycling and more people walking around towns. But there's something else that people don't realise. They know about the fossil fuels, they know about the energy that's consumed burning fossil fuels in vehicles and so on. What they don't realise is that meat also contributes to climate change. And it's a surprising fact that livestock, that's cattle and sheep and so on, livestock contributes as much to climate change as all of the cars, trucks, planes, trains and ships on Earth combined. I'll just let you think about that for a moment. So livestock contributes 14% to climate change, and that's the same as all of the cars, trucks, planes, trains and ships combined. And the other thing we need to be aware of is that forests are our best natural defence against climate change. And as this picture shows, trees convert CO2 into plant material, so they absorb CO2, and in doing so they grow and they lock up CO2. But when we cut down trees or we burn forests, we release that CO2 into the atmosphere. And that's why it's so vitally important that we stop cutting down rainforests like the Amazon. And we are cutting down the rainforests at an amazing rate. As this picture shows, every 60 seconds the area of rainforests, tropical forests, the size of 30 football pitches is cut down every single minute, day in, day out. So, that might sound all a bit gloomy. What can you do to do something about it? What action can you take? What action can I take? What action can we take together? Well, the first thing we can do is we can try and cut down the amount of fossil fuels that we use every day. So that means getting out of our cars, walking or cycling wherever possible, and also taking the train or the bus rather than taking private cars. And trying to go, if we are going on holiday abroad, to go by boat or train rather than to fly. The second thing is to try and reduce the amount of meat that we eat. That doesn't mean to say necessarily everyone has to be a vegetarian or a vegan, but it does mean that we need to reduce the amount of meat. So maybe not eat meat every day, maybe only eat it once or twice a week, and to eat more fruit and vegetables. And where possible also to eat fruit and vegetables that are produced locally, because also flying fruit and vegetables from the other side of the world contributes to climate change. And then thirdly, just trying to reduce our energy consumption in other ways. It means keeping windows closed when the heating's on, turning off switches on lights, turning off your computers and TVs when you finish using them. And also trying to recycle as much as possible and having showers instead of baths. All of these save energy and help reduce climate change. Now, Greenpeace have produced a little leaflet which gives you loads of ideas, and you can download this leaflet from the Greenpeace website, and the website address is shown there. So it's www.greenpeace.org, and then go to all-resources. Now, some of you may have heard of a young Swedish schoolgirl called Greta Thunberg, and Greta has been campaigning about climate change, And it started with her on a school strike every Friday in Sweden, and there's a picture of her here, and that sign that she's holding up, or she's sitting next to, says "School Strike for Climate." And Greta came to Bristol last year, and the top photograph is her talking in Bristol. And somebody's written a book about a kind of a sort of a version of Greta, and it's called Greta and the Giants, and it talks about planting trees. And trees are really important, and so there's a short film now which features Greta and also somebody called George Monbiot, and George is an environmentalist who's been campaigning for many years to try and tackle climate change, and together they're talking about how important trees are to tackling climate change.
This is not a drill. My name is Greta Thunberg. We are living in the beginning of a mass extinction. Our climate is breaking down. Children like me are giving up their education to protest. But we can still fix this. You can still fix this. To survive, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. But this alone will not be enough. Lots of solutions are talked about, but what about a solution that is right in front of us? I'll let my friend George explain.
There is a magic machine that sucks carbon out of the air, costs very little, and builds itself. It's called a tree. A tree is an example of a natural climate solution. Mangroves, peat bogs, jungles, marshes, seabeds, kelp forests, swamps, coral reefs, they take carbon out of the air and lock it away. Nature is a tool we can use to repair our broken climate. These natural climate solutions could make a massive difference.
Pretty cool, right?
But only if we also leave fossil fuels in the ground.
Here's the crazy part. Right now, we are ignoring them. We spend 1,000 times more on global fossil fuel subsidies than on natural-based solutions.
Natural climate solutions get just 2% of all the money used on tackling climate breakdown.
This is your money. It is your taxes and your savings.
Even more crazy, right now when we need nature the most, we're destroying it faster than ever.
Up to 200 species are going extinct every single day.
Much of the Arctic ice is gone. Most of our wild animals have gone. Much of our soil has gone.
So what should we do?
What should you do?
It's simple. We need to protect, restore, and fund. Protect. Tropical forests are being cut down at the rate of 30 football pitches a minute.
Where nature is doing something vital, we must protect it.
Restore. Much of our planet has been damaged.
But nature can regenerate, and we can help ecosystems bounce back.
Fund.
We need to stop funding things that destroy nature and pay for things that help it.
It is that simple. Protect, restore, fund.
This can happen everywhere. Many people have already begun using natural climate solutions. We need to do it on a massive scale.
You can be part of this.
Vote for people who defend nature.
Share this video. Talk about this.
All around the world, there are amazing movements fighting for nature. Join them.
Everything counts. What you do counts.
And then the other thing we can do is just to remember the 4 R's. And what are the 4 R's? Well, first of all, refuse. Only buy things that you really need. If you don't need it, don't buy it, because everything that we buy has to be produced and has used energy. Try and reduce the amount of energy you use and reduce the number of things that you buy. And when you have bought something, try and get as much use out of it as possible. So it's a good idea, for instance, to get a bag for life and then use it every time you go shopping rather than taking a new plastic bag. And when you have finished with things and you can't use them anymore, make sure that you clean them, wash them and put them in the right recycling box so that they can be made into something new. Thanks so much for watching. If you want my contact details, then they're showing on the screen now. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.